The alien scout ship had studied dying stars, collapsing civilizations, and weapons that could tear apart planets. But nothing in its records prepared it for a single human living alone in the frozen north, and what he would build when no one was watching. Elias Ward had not come to the Arctic wilderness to prove anything. He came because the world had become too loud. 5 years earlier, he had been a systems engineer working on climate satellites. He understood machines better than people. When corporate politics buried his clean energy project, something inside him broke. Instead of fighting, he disappeared. He sold everything. Bought land where maps turned white. No roads. No neighbors. Just snow, stone, and sky. But Elias was not running away. He was experimenting. His cabin looked small from a distance, just wood and steel, but beneath it was a foundation of layered insulation, underground storage, and a thermal battery system he had designed himself. During summer, the structure stored heat inside rock chambers beneath the floor. During winter, it released warmth slowly, keeping the cabin livable even in brutal cold. He did not rely on supply trucks. He built systems. Wind turbines from scrap aircraft aluminum. Solar panels repaired from discarded cells. A hydrogen battery system constructed from repurposed industrial tanks. Every part had a purpose. Every mistake became a lesson. Elias believed something simple: if civilization failed tomorrow, knowledge should survive. What he did not know was that he was being evaluated. Orbiting high above Earth was a reconnaissance vessel from the Arithari Collective, a species that believed intelligence must be centralized, optimized, and controlled. Individual creativity, in their history, had caused chaos. So they eliminated it long ago. The collective had studied humanity for decades. Their conclusion was simple. Humans were divided, emotionally unstable, dependent on infrastructure, easily conquered. But before invasion, they always performed ground-level observation. They searched for edge cases, individuals living without support systems. That was how they found Elias Ward. Inside the cloaked scout vessel, observer Thalren adjusted the viewing field. The alien's body was tall and thin, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly under ship light. His species communicated mostly through neural pulses, but field scouts were trained in silent thought. Thalren had expected to document slow decline. Instead, he observed construction. Elias was outside in -20°C wind, reinforcing his turbine tower. He had predicted ice accumulation stress and redesigned the blade angle weeks earlier. When the first heavy frost hit, the turbines continued spinning smoothly. Thalren recorded the anomaly. Human subject shows anticipatory planning beyond survival instinct. Days passed. Elias mapped wind currents using handmade smoke tracers. He refined his greenhouse insulation using layered plastic and air gaps. He built an automated irrigation system from gravity-fed reservoirs. He kept notebooks filled with sketches, formulas, and reflections. But what fascinated Thalren most was this. Elias spoke out loud while solving problems. "Okay, that failed. Why?" Elias muttered while examining a cracked pressure valve. "Material fatigue. My mistake. So we redesign." He treated failure like a teacher. The Arithari had eliminated failure generations ago through strict predictive modeling. They saw mistakes as inefficiency. Yet this human embraced them. Then came the solar flare. It struck without warning. Satellites across Earth flickered. Power grids failed in multiple regions. Communication systems went dark. In orbit, the Arithari ship remained protected. On the ground, Elias lost everything electronic in one silent second. His battery system shut down. His radio fried. Control circuits melted. The temperature that night dropped fast. Thalren leaned closer to the observation screen. This was the true test. Without technology, humans collapse. Elias stepped outside, looked at the dark sky, and nodded slowly. "Well," he said calmly, "back to basics." He did not panic. He opened a sealed locker beneath his floor, mechanical backups. Hand crank generators. Analog tools. Paper schematics. He had predicted solar interference years earlier. Through the night, he rebuilt core systems using shielded wiring he had stored inside grounded containers. He rewired heating manually. He converted part of his turbine to direct mechanical drive instead of electrical transfer. By sunrise, his cabin was warm again. Thal Ren felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Over the next week, reports flooded into the Arithari vessel. Human cities were struggling. Power failures triggered chaos in several regions. But scattered across the planet, small groups adapted quickly. And here, at the edge of frozen wilderness, one human had restored full functionality without assistance. The collective's central AI processed the data. Probability of rapid human collapse dropped by 12%. Thal Ren was ordered to continue observation. Then something unexpected happened. Elias began building something new. Not for survival. For communication. Using salvaged copper coils and magnetic cores, he constructed a low-frequency transmission device. Primitive, but powerful. It did not rely on satellites. It bounced signals through atmospheric layers. He worked with focus unlike anything Thal Ren had seen. Night after night, Elias adjusted frequency modulation by hand. He used stars for calibration reference. He studied aurora patterns. He was trying to talk beyond Earth. Thal Ren froze. Had humanity detected them? No official broadcasts suggested awareness. But Elias kept transmitting. A simple repeating message. If anyone is listening, we are still here. The message was not hostile. Not afraid. Just present. The Arithari collective debated. Ignore it. Or respond. Protocol for bad interference before full invasion readiness. Yet Thal Ren hesitated. For the first time in his career, the mission parameters felt incomplete. Because this human was not behaving like prey. He was behaving like a pioneer. And pioneers were unpredictable. Late one night, as aurora lights danced above the Arctic sky, Elias adjusted his transmitter again. He did not know an alien ship hovered silently beyond sight. He simply believed something deeply human. Silence is not the same as being alone. In orbit, Thal Ren made a decision that would alter the fate of two civilizations. He sent back a private report, not to the collective AI, but to a restricted research council. Subject demonstrates adaptive intelligence exceeding predictive invasion models. Recommendation: delay conquest. Study further. Because if one human in isolation can rebuild civilization from ice and scrap, what would billions do together? And for the first time since the Arithari discovered Earth, they began to wonder if humanity was not a target, but a variable. The first time Elias Ward saw the strange light in the trees, he didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for a notebook. It was past midnight. The aurora was bright, like green fire across the sky. Elias stepped outside to check his wind tower and saw something that did not belong. Tiny flashes between the trunks, too steady to be lightning, too sharp to be animal eyes. He stood very still, letting the cold bite his face. Then he whispered, "Okay, that's new." Back inside, he shut off every light. He covered the windows with thermal cloth, leaving only a narrow viewing slit. Through a homemade periscope made from angled mirrors, he watched the forest line. The flashes returned. A faint hum followed. Elias didn't tell himself he was imagining it. He didn't panic either. He did what he always did when reality changed. He tested. He placed 3 small heat sources, metal cups filled with hot water, at different distances from his cabin. He waited. If something was scanning heat signatures, it would react. Minutes passed. Then the nearest cup suddenly frosted over in a way that made no sense, like the warmth had been pulled out instantly. Elias felt his mouth go dry. That was not wind. That was technology. He quietly walked to the corner of his workshop and opened a sealed case. Inside was his just-in-case equipment, signal detectors, a directional MIC, a coil receiver he had built from old radio parts. He powered it using a hand crank. The receiver crackled. At first it was noise. Then, structure. A repeating pattern, pulses at regular intervals, not human radio. Elias's eyes narrowed. He adjusted the coil's orientation. The pulses grew clearer. He didn't understand the message, but he recognized the truth. Someone was nearby, watching. Above the trees, the cloaked Arithari scout vessel hovered in total silence. Observer Thalren had not meant to reveal anything. The ship's damaged sensor array had been forced to compensate after the solar flare. A minor power fluctuation had leaked energy into the canopy. Normally, humans wouldn't notice. But Elias had. Thalren watched the human from the ship's display field as Elias turned off his lights, changed his observation angle, and began sweeping the forest with a coil receiver. The alien scout's thin hands tightened. Impossible. The human should not detect that frequency. Thalren's ship was not designed for close contact. It was a shadow, a whisper. But in the last hour, the human had performed something disturbing. He had begun triangulating. Elias set up 3 receivers at different points around the cabin. He used string and stakes to align angles. Then he drew a map. "You're up there," he murmured. "Or, close." The air felt heavier with every breath he took. By sunrise, he had narrowed the direction to a specific cluster of trees. He did not go charging in. Instead, he built a trap. Not a violent one. A clever one. He assembled a simple tower from wood and metal. On top, he mounted a reflector dish made of layered foil and scrap steel, something that would bounce radio signals strongly. He made sure it was visible from above, like a bright target. Then he set a small transmitter at its base and began broadcasting a new message. Not in English. In math. A pattern of prime numbers. Then a pause. Then the Fibonacci sequence. Then a simple geometric progression. He leaned back in his chair, watching the signal meter bounce. "If you're real," he said softly, "you'll understand that." Inside the scout vessel, alarms lit up. The human was sending structured data. That was not a distress signal. That was an invitation. Thalren's breathing slowed. He contacted the Restricted Research Council again. Urgent. Human subject is attempting non-human communication. Displays pattern language competence. The council replied with a cold directive. Proceed with minimal interaction. Acquire sample. Return. Thalren's chest tightened. Acquire sample meant capture. Dissection. Study. The Arithari had never asked permission from a species they planned to conquer. But as Thalren watched Elias, something in him resisted. Because Elias wasn't begging. He wasn't afraid. He was curious. And curiosity, Thalren realized, was one of the most dangerous forces in the universe. That night, the decision was made without Thalren's consent. A second craft descended. A collector drone, small, armored, built for extraction. It slipped through the trees like a silent insect and landed 50 meters from Elias's cabin. Elias heard nothing. But his dogs did. He had 2 old husky mixes he'd rescued years earlier. They slept inside near the stove, usually calm. Tonight, they both lifted their heads and growled low, deep in their throats. Elias froze. The dogs didn't growl at wolves. They only growled when something felt wrong. Elias did not grab his rifle first. He grabbed his emergency flare and his coil receiver. He stepped outside into the snow, boots crunching softly. Wind whispered through pine needles. The aurora shivered overhead. The dogs stayed close behind him, hair raised. Then Elias saw it. A shape in the trees. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It looked like a floating metal spine with segmented limbs, hovering inches above the snow. Lights crawled across its surface, scanning. Elias's heart hammered. But his mind stayed sharp. He lifted the flare slowly, not threatening, just ready. The drone turned toward him, silent. Then the air around Elias tingled, like static before lightning. A net fired, thin strands of shimmering material meant to tighten and paralyze. Elias didn't dodge. He dropped. The net skimmed above him and struck the snow behind. Elias rolled, kicked snow into the air, and fired the flare straight at the drone's sensor cluster. Bright red light exploded. The drone jerked back, blindsided. Elias ran, not away, but sideways, toward his tower. He slammed a switch he had installed earlier. The reflector dish snapped upright. The transmitter at the base surged. And suddenly, the forest filled with a screaming electromagnetic burst, not enough to hurt living things, but enough to overload sensitive alien systems. The drone's lights flickered. Its limbs spasmed. Then it dropped onto the snow like a dead machine. Inside the cloaked scout vessel, Thalren stared in shock. The human had built an EMP trap. From scrap. In days. The Arithari's entire military doctrine depended on the belief that humans needed advanced industry to create effective countermeasures. They assumed isolated individuals were harmless. Elias had just proved the opposite. Elias approached the fallen drone cautiously. The dog circled, barking. Elias touched the metal casing with a gloved hand. Cold. Too cold. He pulled out his notebook again, hand shaking slightly, and wrote one sentence. Not alone. Not human. Not friendly. Then he looked up toward the tree line, toward the patch of sky where he believed the Watcher was hiding. And he spoke clearly, loudly, like he was talking to a person. I don't know who you are, he said, voice steady, but I know you saw that. He waited. Silence. He continued, slower now. I don't want war. But if you came here thinking we're helpless. He gestured to the drone. You're already wrong. Above him, Thalren felt something like fear, but also respect. He had watched great civilizations fall because they could not adapt. He had watched advanced empires fail because they relied too much on systems and not enough on minds. This human had no backup. No army. No support. Only creativity. And he had just disabled alien technology using a trap made from scrap metal and clever timing. Thalren opened a private channel again to the restricted council. Extraction attempt failed. Human neutralized collector drone. Recommend immediate withdrawal. The council replied instantly. No. Escalate. Begin pre-invasion phase. Thalren's pulse raced. Escalation meant sending a signal to the main fleet. It meant the Earth timetable moved from years to weeks. And it meant Elias Ward would be one of the first humans targeted. Thalren stared at the human below, standing in snow, flare light fading, dogs at his side, eyes lifted into the night. Elias didn't look like prey. He looked like a warning. Thalren whispered to himself, barely audible. You have no idea what you're waking up. Then, against orders, he did something the Arithari never did. He sent Elias a message. Not in speech. In light. A short burst from the trees. 3 pulses. A pause. Then 2. Then 3 again. A simple pattern that meant one thing. I am here. And the next burst meant another thing, using the math language Elias had started. Danger is coming. Elias saw the pulses. He didn't smile. He didn't relax. But his shoulders loosened slightly, like a man who had finally received proof. Okay, he whispered to the cold night. So you can talk. He looked down at the fallen drone. Then he looked back at his cabin, the tools, the plans, the notebooks. His isolation was over. And if something was coming, he needed more than traps. He needed allies. The invasion fleet was already moving when Elias Ward decided to stop being alone. High above Earth, hidden behind the dark side of the moon, massive Arithari warships adjusted their silent engines. Their calculations were precise. Their projections were confident. Humanity depended on systems. Destroy the systems. Control the species. But down in the Arctic wilderness, one human had already begun rewriting that equation. Elias did not sleep the night after the drone attack. He dismantled the machine piece by piece inside his workshop, careful, patient, respectful of what it could do. He did not treat it like a trophy. He treated it like a teacher. The material was unlike anything he had seen, light, layered, almost organic in structure. The circuitry was grown, not printed. But even alien technology obeyed physics. And physics, Elias understood. He mapped the drone's power core first. He studied how it shielded against overload. He smiled slightly when he realized something important. "It's optimized," he whispered. "Not adaptable." The Arithari built perfection. Humans built flexibility. By sunrise, Elias had integrated parts of the drone into his own transmitter array. He boosted its range tenfold. Instead of whispering into the sky, he was now shouting. His message changed. Not just math. Coordinates. Encoded in patterns only someone who had seen his earlier primes would recognize. Then a final line. Humans adapt. Do not escalate. Above him, observer Thalren felt dread settle in his chest. The main fleet had received the escalation order. Arrival, 6 days. 6 days until orbital strike demonstrations began. 6 days until Earth satellites were erased. Thalren watched as Elias transmitted again and again, refining the signal. But then something unexpected happened. The signal echoed. Not from space. From Earth. Thousands of kilometers south, in the mountains of Chile, a retired radio astronomer named Sofia Alvarez had been monitoring unusual atmospheric disturbances since the solar flare. When Elias's amplified pattern hit her handmade array, she almost ignored it. Then she saw the primes. Then the Fibonacci sequence. Her hands trembled. She responded. From Kenya, a young engineer named David Otieno picked up the exchange through a modified ham radio network he had built after regional power failures. He recognized structure, not noise. He joined. From Norway, from Mongolia, from rural Canada, from abandoned oil platforms in the North Sea, humans who knew how to build without permission began listening. Within 48 hours, Elias was no longer alone. They didn't know his name. They only knew his signal signature. They called him North Star. Elias realized what was happening when his receiver flooded with structured replies. He stared at the notebook in disbelief. "We're still here," he murmured. Humanity, scattered and imperfect, had done something the Arithari never predicted. They self-organized. No central command. No government directive. Just curiosity. Just defiance. Elias changed strategy immediately. He sent a new instruction set. Prepare EMP shielding. Harden analog backups. Watch the sky. Across the globe, small workshops lit up. Old engineers dusted off forgotten manuals. Farmers reinforced tractors with grounded mesh. Amateur astronomers began tracking objects leaving lunar orbit. Sophia in Chile did orbital calculations by hand when her software glitched. David in Kenya redesigned a wind turbine to generate burst pulses. A mechanic in Alaska converted snowplow batteries into capacitor banks. They had no army. But they had minds. On the 6th day, the Arithari fleet moved into visible range. At first, they were only streaks across the night sky. Then bright points. Then unmistakable shapes. Governments panicked. Markets crashed. But in cabins, barns, mountain observatories, and desert workshops, a quiet human network waited. Elias stood outside in the snow, transmitter humming beside him, dogs at his side. He felt fear, real, heavy fear, but it did not control him. He spoke into the MIC one last time. "Remember. They expect collapse. Give them chaos." The first orbital strike hit the Pacific, non-lethal, a show of power. Satellites fell like sparks. Then the Arithari transmitted their demand. Surrender infrastructure. Accept governance. Resist and be neutralized. Silence followed. Then, something unexpected happened. Across Earth, thousands of independent EMP bursts ignited simultaneously. Not powerful enough to harm cities, but powerful enough to disrupt low-orbit targeting arrays. The Arithari ships flickered. Their predictive models fractured. They had expected centralized defense. Instead, they faced distributed unpredictability. Each time they adjusted for one pulse source, 3 more appeared somewhere else. In Norway, Sophia rerouted power manually and triggered a second wave. In Kenya, David overloaded his turbine bank, grinning as alien targeting systems blinked. In Alaska, the mechanic laughed as his snowplow capacitors fired like thunder. And at the edge of the Arctic wilderness, Elias activated the final piece. Using components from the captured drone, he amplified a focus signal, not destructive, but invasive. He transmitted into the Arithari command channel. Not a virus. Not a hack. A message. Live video. The feed showed something simple. Humans working together. Farmers reinforcing greenhouses. Engineers repairing radios. Children drawing alien ships and writing "We see you." Then Elias stepped into frame. He looked tired. Windburned. Calm. "You studied our cities," he said steadily. "You saw our chaos." He paused. "You didn't study this." The camera shifted to show dozens of signal sources lighting up on a crude global map. "Take away our systems. We build new ones. Knock us down. We adapt. We don't need perfection. We need possibility." Behind him, the northern lights shimmered. "We are not optimized," Elias continued. "We are creative." Inside the lead Arithari warship, the collective's central AI recalculated for the first time in centuries. Probability of total conquest, 41%. Probability of prolonged resistance, 89%. Probability of human technological evolution under threat, exponentially rising. The models showed something terrifying. If humanity survived this first wave, they would learn from Arithari systems. They would reverse engineer. They would innovate faster under pressure. They would not become subjects. They would become rivals. Observer Thalren stood before the command council chamber and spoke openly. "They are not unified by control," he said. "They are unified by challenge. Every strike makes them stronger." Silence filled the chamber. Then the unthinkable happened. The fleet engines powered down. Across Earth, the bright streak slowed, then stopped advancing. A new transmission came from orbit. Not a demand. A proposal. Dialogue. On the snow-covered ground, Elias lowered his transmitter slowly. He did not cheer. He did not celebrate. He simply exhaled. Around the world, independent signal stations remained active, ready. Humanity had not won through weapons. They had won through adaptability. Through distributed thinking. Through refusal to collapse. Above the Arctic sky, Thalren watched as the aurora shimmered again. For the first time, the Arithari collective faced a species that did not fear imperfection. And that made them powerful. Elias looked at the stars one last time that night. 5 years ago, he had come to the wilderness to escape the noise of the world. Now he had become its signal. He smiled faintly. Silence was never emptiness. It was space waiting to be filled. And humanity had just filled the sky.